have good reasons to keep the street epistemology, or is that based off of maybe people having a bad association of people maybe arguing in these types of rooms? Or is there ever a point in which we might allow these rooms to be more available and open, for, and that would might even allow for more one-on-one talks between individuals?
You take that, David. I was doing something with tech issues.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'm not aware of any of the rooms that we've had recently closed. I from my understanding, all the rooms that we've done so far in this series have been open. That's my hope, at least. Are you talking about it? Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more about?
Sorry, yeah, I should clarify.
Yeah.
I, as a member of the Street Epistemology group, do not have the ability to create a room one-on-one with somebody.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you're talking about leadership abilities, or
I can maybe speak to that a little bit, David. It's actually a setting in the club where you can either allow members, so non-leaders and non-admins, to open rooms, and it's turned off for the Street Epistemology Club. So members are not able to start rooms. He's wondering if ever that will be open.
To elaborate, like in the Black Atheist Club, I can create a room, but those rooms happen to be private. So I don't necessarily would want that either. I was wondering if there's perhaps a reason we could have it both public and members could create rooms. And if you see evidence, with that evidence could be the reason that we then change it back to only certain members being able to open rooms.
Yeah, I think maybe Reed, you could probably speak to this more than I could. I'm not really sure how to change the settings of those, and what the criteria is for all that. I think you created this club, right, Reed?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm not really sure how to do that, to be honest with you.
I think just admins and leaders can make rooms right now who want, I'm open to adding more people as leaders. So if you're interested in SE and want to do more rooms, let me know.
I am, but would you be able to speak to maybe the reasons why you have not chosen? Like, what was the initial reason? It could be a good reason that you had. So I guess I'm asking you, what was the good reason that you had to make it only leaders? So that as I present this, I may be like cognizant of like some of the reasons that you had, because maybe you did have a good reason.
I guess I'm doubtful that anyone, if they join the club, if they started a room in the SE club and they started just debating or arguing, that's not going to look good on SE. So I'm doubtful that will not happen if I let that be the option. But I'm open to testing that. If people join the club and anybody can make a room and everyone is doing a great job practicing street epistemology and letting people know what it's about, that would be ideal. But yeah, I'm open to testing it.
Okay, sounds good.
Doesn't look like we have any other questions come out. Did you want to ask any other questions or make any other comments?
That was actually my main question, and I actually have to run, so I'm glad I was able to ask it before I have to head out. I mean, I probably have other questions that I could ask, but for the time being, I'll just ping people if to see what, or just listen to on YouTube on any of the questions that other people ask for the time being.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for joining the room and being here and asking your question. We'll hopefully we'll see you around. We try to do this room every Saturday around this time. So if any other questions come up that you want to ask or anyone else, feel free to do that. Join us. Early, do you have any questions for Reed? I've got a long list of questions, but if you have some that you want to ask him, go for it while we wait for other questions to come up.
Yeah, actually, I was just thinking, Reed, I wonder if you would find it appropriate, or if you're willing to get the maybe do a session here. Like if we have someone that has a claim, would you be willing to like? Do you think this is a good medium for you to do an examination?
Yeah, I'm definitely set up for
you're
that.
Live on Clubhouse.
I'm streaming on YouTube as well, and I have a Miro tab where I can map out arguments. I'm always game to do that. We did some argument mapping a little bit in real life yesterday at UCLA, but yeah, that's a fun thing to do.
Okay, yeah, I'll include that in the room recent as well. Then, and so if anyone does have a claim or a belief that they wouldn't mind having examined, feel free to raise your hand as well. Oh, John Lee has one.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, John.
Welcome, John.
Yeah, I'm a Christian, and I've been to a room, SE 101, before. This was maybe 2 weeks ago. I was there for a couple of hours. I'm a Christian, and the reason I responded is you guys said you wanted to examine my belief, and I'm game.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, John. So yeah, Reed, if you wanna maybe give it a try with John.
Sure thing. Sounds good. How's it going, John? Welcome. You said you've been to another SE 101 thing before. Was it on the SE Clubhouse or another?
Yes, in Clubhouse.
Yeah, was it on the Atheism Clubhouse or this Street Epistemology Club?
No, the Street Epistemology.
Gotcha. Yeah, and how long have you been on Clubhouse? How have you been enjoying it so far?
I've been here about a month and a half. Yeah, I'm enjoying it quite a bit. Been making a lot of new contacts, especially Muslim contacts. And, I normally like to, I've been dealing with atheists maybe 23 years online. And so, so that's usually my area of interaction.
Gotcha. Dealing with atheists online for the past 23 years. Wow. What have been some highlights in the past for you, or just some interesting anecdotes?
Well, recently there's an atheist by the name of Bubby who became a Christian just the other day. He was an atheist. Very interesting guy. He knew quite a bit about Christianity, and especially the doctrines of grace and so forth. And he actually became a Christian 2 days ago. That was very encouraging.
Wow. Did you find this person on Clubhouse or somewhere else?
Oh yeah, he's here. He's probably on my follow list. He used to call himself an atheo-Calvinist, and then he since changed his bio.
Calvinist.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. Fun. Yeah, so what we do here is like to chat with people about what they believe and why, using street epistemology, a Socratic friendly style. How familiar are you with street epistemology, John? Can you may explain more?
I am not familiar whatsoever. I did just get texted something with regard to a Peter Boghossian?
Yeah, this way of having conversations originated from this book, which might be relevant to you, called A Manual for Creating Atheists. And that is the origin of the conversational method. Although in the past few years, we've tried to expand it out into just general critical thinking, talking about any claim, politics or spirituality or science, philosophy, whatever. But that is where it came from. And still can be used for religious conversations. And, but the original title of that book is kind of a publisher's, adding to make it more marketable. It's really about Manual for Creating Critical Thinkers, people who are open to being wrong about whatever they believe, people who want to believe in true things for good reasons, stuff like that. And the way of having conversations is mainly a Socratic method style. And I usually keep my opinion out of it unless you ask. And then I help people think through what they believe and why, and how we can know those reasons are good reasons. Does that sound good?
Yeah. I mean, so it's, yeah. I mean, I consider my beliefs epistemically justified.
Awesome. Great. All right. So, yeah, the first thing is to pick a topic, pick a claim. I assume we're going to be talking about a claim related to Christianity. How would you like to phrase the question? Either like a God exists or Christianity is true, or what would you say?
Yeah. I mean, I believe the claims of the Bible.
Okay. I assume the core claim is like for Christianity is Jesus died and rose again in the past.
Yeah. And also Jesus is God incarnate.
Jesus is God incarnate. Okay. Yeah. Or just make it Christianity is true? Or is that too vague? I guess we can define Christianity by that,
that's
core
okay.
claim.
That's okay with me. I believe that Christianity is true. Sure.
Yeah. And Christianity is the belief that Jesus is God incarnate and rose from the dead.
Yeah. And that he died for our sins. And that faith in Christ for the propitiation of our sins, provides salvation for those who believe.
Salvation. Jesus. Yeah, I'm writing down some parentheses on track. Jesus is God incarnate. Incarnate. Is that the best way to say it?
God in flesh, hypostasis, however which way you want to consider it.
Just Jesus is God, period. How about
that? God the Son, yes.
Okay.
Because there is a doctrine which is called the Trinity, which we guys would probably aware about.
Mm-hmm. So Jesus died and rose from the dead. Jesus is God the Son, part of the Trinity, and something about salvation. Jesus provides salvation.
Jesus, we are imputed the righteousness of Christ and through faith in his death on the cross, and so we are thus saved, from our sins, from the consequences of our sins, which is death, and that is what faith provides.
Jesus provides salvation from death, pretty much. Is that
yes,
fair?
That's fair.
Okay. Yeah. So, which of these claims is probably best to talk about? If Jesus died and rose from the dead, Jesus is God the Son, or Jesus provides salvation from death. Which of these implies that Christianity is true the most?
I would say the belief that Jesus died for our sins, and through faith we receive eternal life. I would say that's the core of Christianity.
Through faith you receive eternal life.
That's correct.
Write that down. So the core premise is Jesus died and rose from the dead. If this is a reason to think that Christianity is true, because let me think of a connecting assumption with that. I guess the connecting assumption is only God can rise from the dead. Is that fair? Or how would you connect that assumption?
Yeah, I would say that only God has the power to raise those from the dead as creator and destroyer.
And writing that down. Only God has the power to raise itself or others from the dead. That's fair?
Sure. Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. All right. Is that all the assumptions we need in this reason? The reason I'm keeping track of is here is Jesus died and rose from the dead. What other connecting assumptions would we have? I guess I can split that into two claims. Jesus died and Jesus rose from the dead. And rising from the dead is not something that can be done naturally. It requires some kind of natural intervention from God.
Correct. Necessary supernatural intervention. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I'm not sure if you can access YouTube. You can follow along what I'm doing. I'm trying to do with the argument mapping.
Yeah, I mean, I actually just quickly perused your channel, which was, I guess, Cordial Curiosity. I didn't see any videos or anything, but
I'm streaming
I just kind of looked at some of the videos.
I'm streaming on the Street Epistemology channel. I think I have that in my
just YouTube Cordial Curiosity. I just looked up some of the playlists, and that's about it. I didn't actually click on any.
Okay, maybe David or someone can send you the link to to this video. It's on the Street Epistemology channel. So anyway, it's not important.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. So Jesus died, Jesus rose from the dead, and only God has the power to raise itself from the dead. Or others from the dead. Yeah, that's fair. Okay. All right. Is that all we need for this reason? Let me think. Yeah, I think that's fair. I forgot also to get your confidence about this claim that Christianity is true. Say on a scale from 0 to 100. If 100 is absolutely confident, no doubt whatsoever. 50 is not sure. 100 is absolutely confident. This did not happen. It's not true. Or is your current confidence about it?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to quantify it, in terms of, because I consider a level of confidence sort of like probabilistic knowledge, of which I claim faith rather than some type of like a probability.
Faith, which would mean 100%?
No, a faith would be simply like a confidence, but I don't really quantify it, is what I'm saying. It's like a trust. It's an assurance.
Faith.
It's a strong belief.
Faith can't be quantified. The degree.
I think it can, depending on the proposition. But in terms of faith in God, I wouldn't try to quantify it like it's some kind of Dawkins scale. No.
Can't put it on a scale, or don't feel like a scale is helpful to get clarity on how confident you are about it. Maybe some comparisons. Yeah. How confident are you that if you let go of something, it will fall down on that scale from 0 to 100?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that I'm confident. You know, I have faith.
In that proposition as well?
Yes, and that proposition. Oh, you mean the proposition of having faith?
The proposition that if you drop something, it will fall down.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if I drop something, it'll fall down. I would consider that more like experiential knowledge.
Okay. And that would be able to be put on a scale?
Sure. I would think that could be put on a scale.
Where would that be on 0 to 100 for you?
Well, depending on where I drop it, if it's on Earth, and then I would say sure. It'd be if I were to do it multiple times, I think it would fall every time, and thus the confidence level would be 100%. Depending upon other factors that impede the law of gravity, but all things aside, yeah, I would say 100% without those other factors.
Okay. And are you more confident or less confident that Jesus rose from the dead 2,000 years ago versus if you drop something, it'll fall? Which is more confident?
Yeah,
are you more confident about?
I don't think they're analogous.
Not analogous. Okay. Well, I heard you're just faithful about it. You have confidence about it.
Yes, I have confidence in Christ.
All right. Can someone be faithful in something and not believe it to be true?
Can someone be faithful in something and not believe it to be true?
Yeah.
No, I think that violates the law of non-contradiction.
Okay. Faithful means you somehow believe it to be true. You believe it to be true in some way.
Correct.
All right. Gotcha. Can someone be faithful and kind of almost not sure that it's true, but still be faithful?
Yeah, but I would consider that more so like a belief.
Okay. All right. I think
or even an opinion, a feeling.
Gotcha. All right. So yeah, going back to our reason now. The main reason I'm hearing is Jesus died, Jesus rose from the dead, and only a God has the power to raise itself or others from the dead. Let's think about some of these premises. I think it's fair to say it's true that Jesus died. We can assume that to be true. Jesus rose from the dead. All right. Of the two other premises, Jesus rose from the dead, or only a God has the power to raise itself or others from the dead. Let's just focus on Jesus rose from the dead. Let's question that premise. How do we know that's true?
Well, when you say we, I don't consider it an objective. I consider the faith or confidence in that proposition to be subjective in nature. So I wouldn't say we.
You know it to be true through faith as subjective means of knowing?
Well, first and foremost, knowledge is different than faith, and so pistis I consider faith, and gnosis knowledge, and therefore I don't conflate the two.
You would not say you know that Jesus rose from the dead. You would say you had faith that it happened. Is that
that's correct.
That's fair.
That would be correct.
All right. And faith is a kind of belief. Okay.
Yes, both faith and knowledge are beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those Venn diagrams. There's the belief big diagram, and inside that belief diagram is a faith circle and a knowledge circle, can the faith and knowledge overlap, or are they always different?
I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. No. For example, in John 6:9, it says, "We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God." And so they're not mutually exclusive in the sense that one can believe and also know.
They can't overlap. Okay. And with the Jesus rose from the dead, is that something that some people can know as well as have faith about?
Yeah, as far as Jesus rising from the dead, I mean, there are those who, are claimed to have been witnesses contemporaneously, and there are those who believe by faith, by hearing the word that's professed. And so I fall in the latter category.
Okay, the belief kind of category. Some people could know it if they were there in person or had other kinds of quality evidence, potentially.
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
All right. So for you, faith is a reason to believe Jesus rose from the dead,
No.
or no?
Faith, I mean, that would be redundant. It would be, I have faith based upon faith. That's the redundancy and circular. That's not the basis for my faith. No.
Oh, faith is a circular type thing. You're using faith to believe it,
No.
but the
I'm
belief
saying
or
that
no.
I'm saying that my faith is not based upon faith, or else it would be redundant and circular.
Oh, it's not based upon faith.
Correct. My religion is based upon faith. Sure. It's a faith-based religion, but my faith in and of itself is not based upon faith, is my point.
Okay. So Jesus rose from the dead. Are you using anything to believe that, or no?
I am. I have the basis for it. Sure. It's the preponderance of my personal experiences.
You have a personal experience that makes you have faith that Jesus rose from the dead?
Absolutely.
How does having a personal experience get you to have faith in that? Maybe what happened? What's the personal experience, if you don't mind?
Well, it would simply be a conversion experience. And so, for example, I used to be an atheist until I was maybe 25 years old. And, I look at experiments. Well, one experiment, is not reliable. And so you have several experiments to have a consistent result in order to be able to have confidence in the results of those experiments. And equally so, we have experiences. And so rather than relying on one experience, we have a preponderance of experience that establishes confidence in the results of those experiences.
A preponderance of experience. You've had multiple personal experiences, or
Yes, of course. I've been a Christian 27 years.
Write that down. So lots of personal experiences gives you confidence that Jesus rose from the dead. And I'm not sure about how that connects. How does having a personal experience relate to having faith that Jesus rose from the dead?
Well, having faith in the death of Christ for as a propitiation for my sin has resulted in a changed life, as a new creation, so to speak, as Scripture explains. And so, from the experience of prior to belief and subsequent to belief, there are real changes that can be seen and as a direct as a direct result of the faith, of the premise of faith, which leads to actions, which leads to results.
Okay. Through your belief, you've had a changed life that's resulted in some actions. And based on those actions and the results of that, that gives someone.
Yeah, I would say faith leads to actions, leads to change, or at least leads to the evidence of change.
Okay. Faith to actions to changed life. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. If someone else from another religion came on our Clubhouse and joined us in this chat, say like a Hindu, and they had faith that the Hinduism was true, and that led them to actions and a change of life, would that be a good reason to believe in their religion?
Within their worldview, if it is coherent within their worldview, why wouldn't they be justified?
Yeah, if someone is looking at you using that way of coming to that belief and the Hindu coming to that belief, is there any way a third person could tell which one was more accurate or less accurate?
That would be based upon their observations, but the third party not having experience in and of their own selves, would not have the basis to, believe either proposition to be true. They have a base of experiential knowledge.
The third party would need their own personal experiences.
Exactly.
And how could that person going through that personal experience know their experience was caused by a certain God or in a certain religion?
Yeah, I don't answer for other people. I answer for myself.
Yeah, is that Hindu mistaken that their personal experience has anything to do with a Hindu God?
Yeah, I mean, I have my opinions based upon my worldview, but then again, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm saying that there's two different truths. Their truth and my truth. No, not at all. I believe there's one objective truth, but what I am saying is that with regard to the Hindu, they have their own experiences, and with regard to the third party, a lack of experience does not provide any type of justification.
Okay. Is personal experience a reliable way to have confidence in a God like this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there are famous quotes by certain people. One of them is the only source of knowledge is experience. That was said supposedly by Einstein, Gandhi, Mao Zedong. I mean, there's probably 20 people who said something very similar to that. And so I do think that there's a merit to that particular quote.
The only source of knowledge is experience. Okay. Can people be mistaken about their experiences?
Well, absolutely. That's why it requires a preponderance of experiences in order to establish confidence.
Can people be mistaken about preponderance of experiences?
Well, certainly, based upon the presupposition, if it's flawed, and yet, if it does not cohere within a larger web of set of beliefs, then it's simply incoherent.
Yeah. Could a Hindu have a preponderance of experience?
Well, sure, of course, and they do.
Is this the best way to have confidence or faith or belief in this type of belief, in this type of claim?
No, I think there's lots of ways to have properly warranted beliefs. Just through reason. But it does depend upon the premises, the presuppositions that we hold, in order to deduce a logical conclusion.
Okay. Yeah. If someone was using a preponderance of experience to get to their faith in some type of religious claim, Is there any way to test that claim in some other way to make sure they're not mistaken?
You might have to repeat the question. I didn't quite understand.
Maybe like, I'll just ask this. Is the claim Jesus rose from the dead testable?
Empirically testable? Is that what you're asking?
Or philosophically in some way? Is there things that we could do or learn or find out to shift our confidence about that claim?
Well, I mean, as far as the belief, it's not empirically based, if that's what you're asking. You know, it is based upon an experience, but it's an experience based upon what the Bible claimed to be a special revelation, of which I adhere to. And so I believe that the faith I have is not derived in and of my own mental faculties, but by as a gift by God. And so this is what I believe, based according to explicit claims of the Bible, validated by my own experiences and the testimonies of those who are like-minded.
Yeah, I'm hearing a kind of layering of reasoning. Jesus rose from the dead is like a reason to think that Christianity is true, and a way to get to that claim that Jesus rose from the dead is through a preponderance.
It's a reason for me to believe that it's true, not that I don't speak for others that they should believe. I don't even expect them to believe, because without the Spirit, I'm of the position that they cannot believe.
You're of the position that who can't believe?
The person without the Spirit, or the person that has a natural type of carnal mind.
In order to believe, you need something in you first to believe it?
Yes, absolutely.
And that is that the Holy Spirit? Is that fair?
Yes, that would be the Holy Spirit, correct.
So, yeah, let me get this. Let me make sure this is what I'm hearing. Jesus rose from the dead. Below that is preponderance of experience. We know the preponderance of experience is true because of a special revelation. And the special revelation.
Yeah, but I wouldn't put we, and I wouldn't put no.
Yeah, we'll say you have the belief that Jesus rose from the dead because of your personal preponderance of experience, and you have belief that that preponderance of experience is reliable and of good quality through special revelation, and you have belief that special revelation is accurate and true and of good quality because of the Holy Spirit that is inside you?
More or less. I mean, it's not precise, but it's close enough.
Close enough. Yeah, is that how that chain works, or is there something more clear, more fair?
I mean, there's obviously more, but that's sufficient. I mean, unless you need more information.
Okay. Yeah. Could you be mistaken that Jesus rose from the dead?
Sure. Why not?
How would you know? Or how would you come to believe differently?
Because the results would be different.
The results in your life?
Yes.
How does the results in your life relate to that claim being the case or not?
How does my faith line up with, how does it correspond with the results of the reality that I experience in life? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, how does you having a change life, either for the better or for the worse, relate to this claim that Jesus rose from the dead being the case or not?
Yeah, I mean, a changed life is not the sole basis why I have confidence in that proposition. It is one of many. However, with regard to the experiences themselves, yeah, I would say that that a changed life, from from what I the mindset that I used to have before would be evidence for me to have confidence in the veracity of the proposition of Jesus Christ dying for my sins and rising from the dead.
So the change of life is part of this preponderance of experience?
Yes.
Okay, that's one example of it.
Exactly.
Gotcha. All right. How does experience relate to this claim of Jesus rising from the dead being the case or not?
Because
go ahead.
Because the faith in Jesus rising from the dead represents the power of God, and therefore when there's a reliance on the faith of Christ and the power of God through the power of the Holy Spirit specifically, which I believe is inside of, as a deposit guaranteeing my inheritance, so to speak. And so when I live according to this faith, I see results from the actions that I perform through the faith that I have. And so when I see the results are consistent to that, then I believe that what is the proposition that I have faith in has merit.
The results are consistent. Okay.
Correct.
We can back up and ask the question, what caused those results? And one hypothesis I'm hearing from you is the power of God caused them, or just God caused them. Are there any other potential alternative explanations for those results?
Yeah, if you want to put coincidence in there, or chance, or whatever, sure. But there's no reason for me to believe that's the case. No.
Which is the power of God is more plausible or probable for you than chance?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't use the word probable or plausible. I just think that it's more it's more reasonable would be the better word.
Reasonable. If you had an alternative explanation for how those results could have come about, hypothetically, that you came to believe through your own satisfaction for some reason, would that change your either belief or amount of faith in this claim that Christianity is true?
Yeah, I mean, if there's an alternative hypothesis and it is coherent in a way that the model works and contradicts my particular theistic model, Christian theistic model, then why wouldn't that be a reasonable consideration?
Okay, so it would potentially change you?
Yeah, I mean, of course, but there's definitely no reason for me at this moment. I mean, I have more faith than I ever have in my entire life, and so my faith only has grown over the years and decades, rather than the other. I do understand there are some who experience quite the opposite, where they're in a church 30, 35 years, whatever the case is, and they have certain doubts and they ultimately leave the church. As for me, I mean, that's quite the opposite.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just want to make sure these types of things are actual real reasons that give you this faith or belief. And it seems like it's the case. I want to recheck in, see how you're doing with time. Want to keep going? I can ask some different kinds of questions if you're interested.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask away. I'm fine with it.
Okay, yeah, what is this belief doing for you personally? Like, if you found yourself no longer having this belief 5 years from now, what would be missing from your life? What would be missing?
Well, I mean, hope for one. Where's the hope in a lack of belief in God, which I used to have. My only hope would be what? The grave? Would that be my hope? Or where's meaning? Where's purpose? And in terms of ultimate meaning and purpose, there is none. I'm just subjected to entropy and decay and death. And so I have hope today. So I cannot say that I had hope as a skeptic before.
You would have, what I'm hearing you say is not a way to have hope or meaning or purpose without this belief?
Well, yeah. I mean, where is the hope in skepticism? I mean, I can say today that I have hope. I have hope of eternal life.
And what is the second best way to have hope, meaning, or purpose without this belief?
What is the second best way to have hope, meaning, and purpose without my belief?
Yeah. If this is the best way to have it, is there a second best way?
I would think that the only other way would be another theistic religion, I would think. Certainly not skepticism.
Okay. Another religion would need to be, what could potentially do it?
Yeah, theoretically, sure. I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. I think that would be, an alternative model to provide those things, hope and meaning.
Mm-hmm. How about this question? What's been like the most meaningful day of your life?
I think the most meaningful day of my life was probably my conversion event, which was about 27 years ago.
What's the most meaningful experience in your life not related to this religion?
I would think maybe my birth in this world. I don't know what else to say, really. That just at the top of my head.
Anything you remember that gave you made you overjoyed, or like you could just re-experience it if you had that option?
Well, I'll tell you what, this may sound a little bit ironic, but one of the most joyful days of my life was when my father passed away about 5 months ago. And I was able to hold his hand as he breathed his last. And soon after that, his heart stopped. And the reason I had so much joy was because he was a secular humanist and he raised me as such. And late in life, he became a Christian. And I could see on his deathbed that he was very confident of where he was going. And he was ready to go to where we both believe he went, and which is heaven. And so that, to me, was a very powerful experience of joy.
Gotcha. So that was part of something that was important to you, seeing your father, who was raised not religious, not Christian, but then you have hope that you will be able to see him again.
Yes. I mean, not just the fact that I have hope that I'll see him again. I am happy for the hope that he had when he was in his passing, that he was ready to go to heaven as he believed. And I'm grateful for that.
You're grateful for his comfort, knowing him believing that he would not actually be dying permanently, or just changing location.
Something to that effect, yeah. That he'd be going to heaven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hope, meaning, and purpose. Anything else this beliefs allows you to have?
I think the ability to to love as God loved me. I think that's very important as well. According to maybe the 2 commands that God gave, or Jesus gave, which is to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love our neighbor as ourselves. I do think that the first is necessary before the latter, and so my ability to understand that, I'm very grateful for.
Gotcha. Yeah, would you be able to have love or be loved without this belief potentially, or would it be less?
Yeah, not in the way that the Bible describes the love, the agape love of God. I do think that people have ability for some type of empathy and things like that, but there are selfish concerns in the ways of the world and carnality, and so what may appear to be altruistic is self-seeking, and so I think I've been able to see the difference, and the difference is that, for example, in Romans 5:8, God demonstrates His love for us in that while we were sinners, Christ died for us, and so I see that sacrificial type of giving to the point of death, that I can appreciate what the love of God represents.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, so how are you feeling? How do you think the conversation went so far? Any questions for me?
No, to be honest, I'm surprised. I'm usually full of questions, but right now I can't think of any. I may later, but I don't have any now.
Great. Yep. So welcome again to the Street Epistemology Club, and thanks, John, for coming on. If you see us again on here, feel free to come back on. I'd love to pick it up, chat more about it.
Sure, anytime.
Thank you.
That was great. Thanks, Reed and John. John, before you take off, I was curious as to your reaction to this conversation, comparing it to some other conversations that you've had, either here on Clubhouse or just in person, with somebody who doesn't necessarily hold the same beliefs as yourself. I was wondering if you could kind of comment on the comparison of those 2 conversations, if you don't mind.
I mean, me personally, David, I seek out conversations with people who do not share the same worldview, and so I try to meet them where they are and understand as well as explain, and so that, I used to debate a lot, I guess, in my early years, but I've come to a different position where now I'm more interested in knowing people and knowing who they are and where they're coming from. And so I think by meeting them where they are, then I could share what I believe, and they can also share what they believe, and come to common ground and come to a specific standard of understanding that we share. Otherwise, we're just talking past each other.
Great. Yeah. So it sounds like making personal connections is important to you, and in the journey that you see yourself on in the future. I was wondering if you could comment on the conversation you had with Reed, maybe contrast it with some other conversations that you've had in the past.
I mean, the questions that Reed posed are probably questions I fielded hundreds, if not thousands of times from skeptics at various stages, and so they weren't anything different than that I personally experienced. I mean, I guess I just had I guess I've had just a lot of experience with skeptics in general.
So you think that this is a pretty typical conversation, that the way that it goes?
I do, as far as the questions posed. Yes, I find them very typical.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining the room today. You're welcome to ask any last questions or give any other comments before. I think we're going to do a reset, and then hopefully we'll have some more questions.
I will say that engaging with Muslims these days, they do pose engaging questions that I've never considered, that skeptics would never ask me. And this is the nature of the God that I believe in, the Trinity, the potential logical problems with the Trinity, the incarnation. These are engaging questions that I receive that actually make me think about the God I worship. And atheists believe that I believe in one God, but they really don't focus on the triune God that I believe. And Muslims, I think, are more geared toward those type of questions. And I do believe that. I do consider them a lot more thought-provoking. Just this is my personal view.
Right on. Okay. Well, let's see. Early, do you want to do a reset, and then maybe we can get some other comments from the audience members or some other questions that that might come up?
Yeah, for sure. And thank you, John, for participating through that. That was great. Yes, welcome everyone to the Street Epistemology Club, the SE 101 room. We're currently taking questions from people in the audience. If you also have a belief that you would like to have examined, you can also do that. Today we have Reed Nicewander to help you answer all of your street epistemology questions. We also ask that you just raise your hands to ask your question, and that you put yourself back down to the audience once your questions has been answered, so we can bring the next person up. If you'd rather not come on stage, we just ask that you send me a back channel message. That is the paper airplane that's in the bottom right hand corner, bottom right hand side of the app, and I'll ask the question on your behalf. Overall, if you have any questions, this room has been created as a learning environment, and it is being recorded and also actually streamed live for the first time on YouTube in the Street Epistemology channel on YouTube. So you're welcome to also check out the live stream as well. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions or comments, I'm going to bring up Ahmed now. And actually, okay, Mike had a question in the back channel, so I'm going to bring him up real quick first. Ahmed, we'll bring you up here next.
Yo.
Hey, Mike. He had sent a question to the back channel, so I thought I'd bring you up first.
Yeah, my question was just kind of like it's funny, I was playing the question game as well, but just in my own way. So it was just more, it's kind of relevant at this point. My question is to Reed. Did you feel that John was basically kind of like there to really, how should I say this? Do you think that he was there to answer to what he thought was correct or and safe or more vulnerable? And if you were not in this setting, would you ask different questions or ask questions in a different way?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think if he showed up at my table, I would have asked very much the same questions, same things. I'm not sure what else was related to your question about him, his like motivations or something, or his feeling in terms of what he was like truly sharing, what was genuinely why he believed or something. You know, take him at his word. Yeah.
Maybe you want to clarify your table is not your dinner table.
Yeah, my table I use to go out in public to have conversations with random people, either in the park or at UCLA, where David and I were yesterday. So, yeah, I assume he was honest, and I could tell he definitely has had this conversation many times before. And it's nice going through the particular argument. And what you usually don't see in other kinds of conversations is that other focus on the psychosocial motivations, the hope, meaning, and purpose. And we just assume it's going to take a while to change anyone's mind about any claim like this. If that is your goal, and that wasn't particularly my goal. I just wanted to understand why he believed, and I got a great sense of why he believed and why was it important to him. So, yeah.
Excellent. So I'm going to bring this back channel question. I'll ask that after a minute here.
Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you.
Good. So, yeah, my name is Hamed, by the way. Yeah. How are you guys? Reed, Early, David, Alfonso. How's everyone?
Doing well.
Not too bad. Welcome to the club.
Oh, thank you so much. Long-time listener, first-time participator, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a Muslim. Even though Thomas Aquinas is my profile picture right now, I'm actually a Muslim. Yeah. Yeah. So my question for you guys, since you asked the question, my question, I guess would be, do you guys think 1 + 1 is a necessary truth that has to always be true?
Always.
Let me rephrase it. Is there any instance or any possible world where 1 + 1 can equal anything other than 2?
The pure abstraction of it? Probably not, no.
Yeah, okay, so okay. How about like the laws of logic? You think there's any possible world or any possible universe where the laws of logic just aren't true?
I don't know. Leaning towards very much no.
Okay, yeah, so these are what I would call necessary truths. Okay. Now, these truths require a truth bearer. There has to be a conscious mind that bears these truths, that gave the universe, that gave existence itself these properties. That 1 + 1 = 2, the laws of logic. Let's see, you have mathematic truths, you have scientific truths. These are what I would call necessary truths that have to exist in all possible universes. Now, the conscious mind behind it that makes this thing, that gives it this order, that gives it this pattern, I just call God. So my question would be, what do you call this conscious thing, or do you just not believe that, that it exists?
I don't want to confuse the map for the territory. Like math is and logic is kind of language we use to make sense of reality, the territory, and they seem to be very fundamental things. Although I just want to always be open to being wrong about these things. We've had.
Sorry, can you speak a little louder? It's like pouring rain right now. If you can speak a little louder, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, these necessary truths. Truths are properties of, like, they're ideas, and humans, they're like products of human minds in terms of truth, but there is a reality we're trying to map this truth onto. And it seems like these truths, these necessary truths, are fundamental for a lot of our models. So it's good to just work with them, assume them to be the case. But I always want to be open to being wrong about even very fundamental things. We've had very fundamental ideas be wrong in the past. So we could be still wrong about some of the things we're very sure about today. And but necessary truths relating to a conscious mind, that I'm not sure about.
Well, that's why I started off by asking you, can you imagine a world where 1 + 1 would equal anything other than 2? Or can you imagine a world where the law of non-contradiction just doesn't exist, right? And you said no. So, I mean, that's the thing. It does seem that, oh my God, it's pouring right now. It does seem to have like an order. There seems to be like a system in place, be it in our conscious minds, or be it in just a property of how things work, right? There has to be something intelligent or something conscious out there. At least in my opinion, and as a Muslim, I would just call that God, right? And yeah, to me at least, like this is all I need to prove that God is conscious, that God exists. The fact that I cannot imagine a world where the law of non-contradiction just isn't true. I can logically deduce from that, okay, well, there are necessary truths, okay, and from these necessary truths, we can deduce that, okay, that the universe or universes, even other universes, if they do exist, right, they do have a common trend where these universal truths are true even within them.
I understand where you're coming from. Great. Yeah. David, do you want to do another session or to talk about this? Anybody else want to give a try? There's a bunch of other essay people in here. I'd love to hear them practice or whatever you want to do.
I guess I would just want to establish what we're talking about here, what the actual claim is.
I think the claim is Islam is true, right?
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking 1 + 1 = 2, therefore God exists.
Not necessarily. It's more like 1 + 1 = true, equals 2. This is a necessary truth, meaning it's going to be true in every single world, every universe, right? Now the question is, what is the truth bearer for this truth, right? So you have a truth maker, and then you have a truth bearer. So the question becomes, so obviously the truth maker is that you have this thing called 1, you have this thing called addition, right? 1 added to 1, and then you have this thing called 2. This is what makes it true. This is what makes it true, yeah. Now the question becomes, okay, that's the truth maker. What bears the truth? That's what we're trying to understand right now, the truth bearer to these claims.
Something needs to exist in order for truth to be, for things to be true.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, yeah. I mean, if I told you I'm, riding a unicorn right now, well, that would presuppose 2 things. One, I actually, first of all, unicorns do exist, and secondly, I'm currently on top of it, right? So, in order for, and also it does go back, I guess, to what kind of truth theory you hold to, whether it be pragmatic or whether it be corresponding. Me personally, I hold strictly to a corresponding theory of truth. You necessarily might not, and it's worth, if you're gonna for Street Epistemology, it is very important to know whether you hold to a pragmatic view of truth or to a corresponding theory of truth.
What would be your best definition of truth? Like, because you've talked about different kinds of truth, like necessary truth, scientific. I think you said scientific truth, or something like that.
So I would say that a necessary truth is something that has to be true in any and all possible realms. So that was like the laws of logic, that was mathematics, that was logic, that was scientific ones. So that's what I would group as necessary truth. The other kind of truth would be what I would call contingent truth. Like, I exist, right? This is true, but it's not a necessary truth. Like, there could be a world where I don't exist, right? And that's very rational, it's very possible. So that would be a contingent truth. the unnecessary truth, 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, well, first of all, this is something that I can say in English, I can say in Arabic, you can say it in different languages. You can write it down. It's something that everyone seems to understand, and it's true in all possible worlds as well. Whether or not Earth exists, it's relevant. 1 + 1 would still equal 2. Whether or not Earth existed, whether or not there were 8 billion people on the planet right now, whether we were in a matrix and a matrix and a matrix, or this is actually reality, 1 + 1 would always equal 2. So that's what makes it a necessary truth.
Okay. So 1 + 1 = 2. That's a necessary truth. And are you saying that God exists? That's also a necessary truth?
Yes, I am. I would say God has to exist because he's the truth bearer to all these new necessary truths. Yes.
Okay. So truth requires a truth bearer. A necessary truth. A necessary truth requires a truth bearer.
All truths will require a truth maker and a truth bearer. So, for example, the proposition that snow is white, well, that's premised on the fact that there is this thing called snow, and there's this thing called whiteness, and that snow has the attribute of whiteness.
Okay. So necessary truths are made? Is that
No,
what you
so
said?
necessary truths exist, okay, and they require. Well, they do. Obviously, they require a truth maker as well. So the truth maker for 1 + 1 = 2 would be that you have this thing, called one. Now, as for what one is, that's a whole separate question, but relevant for the moment. Then you have this thing called addition, right? So 1 + 1, or plus, and then you have 2, right? This is what makes it true. The fact that we can imagine these things. We have this thing called 1. It's if I ask you what is the number 1, you just say you wouldn't know how to answer it. It's just something arbitrary, as you could say. It's just a number. Well, then the question is, well, what is a number, right? And since this is street epistemology, I really like I really do like the street epistemology approach. And that's why I'm so happy you guys are allowing me to ask you guys questions. If you guys want to ask the question, that's okay, by the way. But I am enjoying this, by the way.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was about to check in with you and make sure we're still okay. So just to recap, a God exists. That statement is true because necessary truths are required. So and then 1 + 1 = 2 is an example of a necessary truth. And so hypothetically, if we found out somehow, I don't know how we would do this, but if we somehow found out that there is a universe in which 1 + 1 did not equal 2, would that mean that a God does not exist?
Well, that's the thing, right? That's why I started off by asking you, can you imagine a world where 1 + 1 = 5, for example, right? And you said no, it's logically impossible, right? And then rightly so, right? You have the law of identity. If A = B, then B = A, right? So you can't imagine a world where where 1 + 1 = 5, for example, right? That's the whole fundamental point of what I'm trying to establish right now. That there is these things that have to be true, not because someone made them, as in some person made them, but more in the sense that we have this thing, right? 1 + 1 = 2. Just basic example, and it has to exist in any and every possible realm.
Okay. If I were to just say that I don't know if there is a possible universe in which 1 + 1 could equal 5, what would that mean?
Yeah, so that would mean that you're being either, no offense, one would be you're being insincere. I would just ask you, well, you'd have to prove that. But two, it would show that you can't know anything, right? You wouldn't know whether you're alive or dead. You wouldn't know if you're in the matrix or you're not in the matrix. At that point, you would not know anything at all. If I asked you to prove anything, Well, you would just say, well, maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't exist, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. We would just live our entire lives, kind of back to what John was saying, with no purpose, with no meaning, just skeptic about everything. Is the sky blue? Maybe. I don't know. Um, you know, uh, what's 5 + 5? I don't know. Maybe 10 sometimes, maybe 2. Which is just not a practical view of life, right? We go to the bank. Hey, I want to withdraw $1 million. But sir, you only have $200. I don't care. I want $1 million, right? You just want. I say it's $1 million, therefore I want $1 million. It's not a practical way of living life, my friend. I do think you should think on it. Think on it. Sleep on it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there is a possibility to be, over skeptical. I definitely agree with that. I was just putting out a hypothetical to see what's actually holding this
Yeah,
belief
the
up.
logical conclusion of it, sure. And that would entail, the logical conclusion would be, you can't be sure about anything. Who is your father? I don't know. Who is your mother? I don't know. I can't know, right? It's not that you don't know, it's that it's physically impossible for you to know. Even if we gave you empirical evidence, you'd have to reject it at that point, right? DNA tests would be irrelevant to you. No standard, no burden of proof would ever be enough to soothe or to satisfy the skepticism, if you're going to say it's possible that 1 + 1 = 5 sometimes.
Yeah, in some universe that we don't even know exists, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is the 1 + 1 = 2 is a necessary truth? Is that your main reason why you believe a God exists?
It's one of them.
Okay. Is there one that holds more weight than that, or is that kind of your go-to reason when somebody asks?
Yeah, it's my go-to only because I think I mean, again, since the title is Street Epistemology, I engage in Street Epistemology as well, right? I'll approach, people who may be theists, may not be theists, and I'll ask them that question, like, do you guys believe that 1 + 1 = 2? They'll obviously all say yes, of course. And the question becomes, well, is it necessarily true? As in, is it true in any possible universe, right? And that's when the ball starts rolling, and like the gears in the brain start, turning, right? Hey, that's an interesting question. I don't know. But what does that mean? What does that entail? Like what you said, right? What if it's possible that equals 5, right? In theory, right? And I do think that, especially being an atheist, right? Most people have the misconception that being an atheist is just rejecting the belief that rejecting the belief in God, but that's not necessarily true. An atheist is making an active claim that there is no God, right? And they're saying that there is no empirical evidence to prove that God doesn't exist. Well, now I'm giving you an example, right? 1 + 1 = 2, right? And it has to always equal 2, right? If you're going to say it equals 5, you'd have to prove that, right? At that point, no amount of empirical evidence would ever satisfy you. You'd always be a skeptic. And as you, by your own admission just now, right? You just had that at times, some people can be too skeptic or too skeptical.
Right. On a practical level, yeah. So I guess what I'm asking is, because it sounds like this is the reason you give when you, as far as argumentation purposes. I was more curious about what your main reason is for holding the belief that a God exists in the first place. Like,
I mean,
like if somebody.
there's a whole bunch of arguments. I mean, there's the contingency argument, there's the kalam argument, there's this argument, necessary truths, there's objective standards, there's morals, there's a whole bunch. But like, we can. I mean, I don't want to hog the stage, and I actually am at work right now, right? But I don't think I don't think we can go through all of those arguments. So there, since the title is where I ask the question, right? What is your evidence to substantiate your claim that there actively is no God sustaining the universe?
Yeah, I haven't made that claim, but maybe sometime whenever whenever you're not at work, we don't want to get you in trouble and stuff. But maybe picking the reason that holds the most weight for your belief, we can possibly examine that a little bit deeper. But yeah, I haven't made such claim.
Okay, well, what is your biggest claim or reason then for rejecting a belief in God?
I haven't made that claim either. I identify as an atheist, which there's a couple of different definitions for that depending on it's almost like your hard atheist versus soft atheist. I kind of see it almost the same way, where my definition or my approach is I need a definition for the God that's in question before I can make a stance on belief. The hard atheist position, from my understanding, is that there is no coherent definition for God, therefore the question is meaningless. But like I said, I refer to the first one. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's basically my position from the get-go.
No, I understand, and I respect the honesty here. Yeah, that's
Cool.
fine. I do think on the necessary truth argument, right? Think on the problem of even of, so we're speaking about epistemology right now, and what it means to know, and if I ask you, right, what is the difference between knowledge and a belief? What would you say, for example?
Well, knowledge, I can use the kind of the classic definition of it being a justified true belief. Although, I don't really like using belief as part of that definition. I think belief is a conscious assumption that you've made based on whatever reason that you have that convinces you. Believing something means that you're convinced that it's likely true. That's my personal definition about that.
No, I understand where you're coming from. That's fine.
Cool.
So, okay, that's interesting. So you would just say knowledge is a justified belief, essentially, right?
Well, that's the kind of the classic definition. Again, I have some problems with it, both because the word true and the word belief, those have a lot of baggage with them, depending on which definition we decide to agree with about truth. I'm still a little bit confused about your definition of truth and how it relates with it being accessible or not. The differences, like when I hear the word true, I think of it as like true in a way where it's not different depending on another word that you put in front of it, like necessary. Like I don't see a difference between necessary truth. Like I think it's redundant. If something is true, it's true.
So you exist right now, correct?
I'm very confident of that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Is it possible that a time will come where you don't exist?
I think that that's possible. Yeah.
Or how about before you were born, did you exist?
I don't know. There's no way for me to find out.
So before you were born, did you exist on this earth?
Well, it depends on when we start existing.
Okay, before your parents met, did you exist?
I have no way to tell.
Okay, well, you can see where I'm going with it, right? Clearly, there's a time before you existed, then you existed, and after you die, you won't cease to exist, right? That's how it's always been understood, right? That's what death essentially is, right? You just cease to exist. So you existing, the proposition that you exist or I exist, for example, that cannot be a necessary truth, necessary truth. Why? Because it's not always going to be true. There's a time before I existed, and there will be a time after I existed. But you can see the difference between like 1 + 1 = 2. That has to be true in every moment, in every universe, at every second.
Yeah, I think that 1 + 1 = 2 is pretty like abstract, and it requires us to both have the same definitions of what 1 is and what 2 is. I don't want to get too far in the weeds about that, but yeah, I guess that's the
Yes,
main
so
problem I have with that.
that's why I asked you if you hold to a pragmatic theory of truth or if you hold to a corresponding theory of truth. For me, I hold to a corresponding theory of truth. For me, if it's true, well, that's it, it's true. But I know a lot of atheists on this app that will say, well, no, something is true to me only if it benefits me personally. So, for example, if I ask them, well, what is consciousness, right? They'll say, oh, it's part of the mind. Well, what is part of the mind? Well, it's part of the brain. Well, okay, we just went full circle. So what's true? So what your consciousness is different than my consciousness. Your mind is different than my mind. What's true for you might not always be true for me, and they're just gonna see and say yes, right? They don't hold to an objective truth. I actually do hold to an objective truth because I believe in a corresponding theory of truth, where 1 + 1 has to equal 2 in all circumstances, at any moment, in any possible universe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe I can clarify a little bit. I would say that something is true independent of any minds or brains. Does that help?
Independent of and independent of any mind. Okay, so for example, here's a good example. Okay, before Newton discovered the law of gravity, you would say that the law of gravity existed, correct?
Yeah, the law of gravity exists whether anybody is around to be conscious of it.
Okay, so then the question becomes 1 + 1 = 2. It's true regardless of there's anyone around to witness it, correct?
Well, I think gravity is different than a math equation.
Why do you think so? In context of this universe, they're pretty much. I mean, I can't imagine a universe where, or at least a moment on Earth, at least, right? Because yeah, it's possible outside this time and space, gravity doesn't need to exist, right? But let's just for the analogy, just to make it a little simpler, right? If there was no on Earth, right, there can't be a place where gravity doesn't exist. Would you agree with that?
Not that I know of.
Okay, yeah, there we go, right? So
Yeah.
now what we can do, right? What we can do now is we can say, okay, if you're on Earth, gravity must exist. Now the question becomes, well, back to 1 + 1 = 2. And wherever you exist, wherever you are, whatever time you are in, 1 + 1 has to equal 2. So I will agree with you, right? Gravity is special to Earth, let's say, but 1 + 1 = 2 is a necessary truth, which means at any moment, at any place, at any time, it must equal 2. It must be true that 1 + 1 = 2. Or the law of non-contradiction, for example.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from. I guess when I say that gravity is different than a math equation, I can like simply make a demonstration of gravity working just by dropping my pen here. That's a little bit different than demonstrating numbers.
I mean, I'm holding, like, let's say I have two phones in my hand, one phone and one phone. Together, I get two phones, right? I don't understand, like, I think you can demonstrate, but then the question becomes, like, what are numbers, right? And it does bring back full circle, like, from an epistemic point of view. Well, what is numbers? What is math? And yeah, what is consciousness? This is exactly
Right.
why I
I
like
think
this
I think math.
epistemology approach.
Yeah, I think math requires a brain or a mind, whereas gravity does not. So
But then
that would be a distinction I would make.
sure, but then the thing is, the gravity is contingent on Earth existing. We agreed on that point, right? It's possible that there is a place in space where, like, for example, even on the moon, right? Gravity exists, but not at the same level that it exists on Earth, right? So if we can imagine like the moon, and we have empirical evidence that the moon has a less empirical value of gravity than Earth does, well, we can imagine a world then where gravity is just zero, right? That's something we can like rationalize, right? So now the thing is, okay, well, if gravity is contingent to Earth, well, what is Earth contingent on then?
Gravity is contingent to Earth. And what was the second part?
What is Earth contingent to?
What is Earth contingent to? What does Earth need in order to exist?
Exactly. Yeah. What does Earth need in order to have gravity?
In order to have gravity?
Yeah.
I don't know. I would probably ask a physicist about these questions, because I
no,
don't
this is a
really.
Street Epistemology. I don't need to go to a physicist. I'm talking to you about this right now. I don't think I need a physicist to tell you that gravity exists because gravity exists on Earth, right? Now, here, hold on. An attribute of Earth is having gravity. Okay. Now, what possesses or who made or what made Earth that gave it gravity? Who gave gravity? Who gave Earth gravity? That's essentially the question, right? Or who/what gave Earth gravity? I think
I
it's a
have
fair
no idea.
question. Unless you want to say that um, by its own preposition, Earth has to have gravity, right? Well, that's fine. But then the question is, how come all planets don't have the same amount of gravity? How come the moon doesn't have the same amount of gravity, right? And that's fundamentally the question, right? It does seem that this is kind of like back to like the fact that, okay, well, Earth was designed in order to have the speed of gravity is 9.8 meters per second, right? So that's like basic physics for you right there, right? If you want to ask a physicist, there you go, right? That's the empirical speed of gravity on Earth, right? Now the question becomes, who made it that? Why is it 9.8? Why isn't it 9.7? Why isn't it an even 10? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's based on our measurements, like meters. That's what we came up with.
No, but I'm saying it's 9.8 meters per second. Why couldn't it have been 10 meters per second? Why couldn't it have been something on the moon? It's not. It's like, I think it's like 3 point something for the moon. I can Google that for you right now if you really want. But gravity on Earth is 9.8 meters per second squared. On the moon, it's something less. Now the question is, who's making it or what's giving it these attributes that makes it either more or less?
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know if a who is required. What? I have no idea.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Think about it. Thank you for. Do you have any questions for me? I know I kind of grilled you guys. If you have any questions for me, I'll stick around, or else I don't want to hog the stage for too long. If you guys want to move on to the next guest, that's totally fine.
I mean, we can get some other questions if you want to hang out. Then we can maybe continue, or yeah, I'm down with that.
That's whatever you guys want to do. Fine by me. It's your room. I'm just a guest here.
No, you're certainly welcome here anytime. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for all your good questions too. It's good talking to you.
Yeah, no, and
likewise,
thank you.
Likewise. No worries. I'm glad you guys liked it.
Yeah, thank you for engaging. So yeah, you're welcome to hang out here on stage. Ahmed, I'm sorry, I apologize.
Hamid,
yeah.
Hamid, yeah.
Okay, easier than I. So yeah, I do have a question from the back channel. I've had a few comments, but here I have actually a question. Okay. So it was regarding someone was in another room and they encountered a claim and they were wondering if it applies to this or not. So it goes, was just in a room with a man who thinks that spanking children is okay and good for discipline. Other than saying it's not. I wonder if SE could be used for those discussions. That's the question.
What about you, Early? What might be a good question for that person?
Well, I would say to answer her question, I would say that yes, it is. The SC could definitely be used for that type of conversation. David, I would be looking at you for what type of questions to ask. But I mean, I think the first thing that I would want to ask is, the confidence level in the claim, and what is the best piece of evidence that spanking it's good discipline for children.
Yeah, that might be a good route. How confident are you that it's okay to spank your kids, and what's your main reason for that, and why is that a good reason? That's pretty classic, I think. What do you think, Reed?
I agree, perfectly applicable.
Okay, so I have two folks here. So Biscuit raise his hands first. Biscuit.
Good afternoon, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, welcome back, Biscuit. Good to see you.
You too.
Maybe you can throw down some more bars later.
Ha ha ha. I actually had some I had a comment on the spanking and whether it's good or bad. I thought that was a very interesting conversation starter.
Yeah, how would you approach that?
Well, I was definitely spanked as a kid, and my wife was never spanked as a child, and we grew up in two totally different atmospheres. We were raised in two different atmospheres, and I think when you look at discipline and the harshness of discipline, I think a lot of times it depends on the harshness of the discipline has a direct correlation to how threatening the environment is in which one is raised. So if you take a slave culture, for instance, if a slave and his wife, some slaves had wives, and they had a child who was, a 10-year-old slave, and that child mouthed off, the consequences for that attitude might end up getting that boy killed. And so the spanking would be a lot more justified, because you really need to course correct. You really need to turn around this behavior, because we live in an environment that's very critically dangerous to that kind of attitude. Whereas if you were born and raised in a safe neighborhood, then not only are the consequences going to be less harsh for those things, and not necessarily demand kind of that type of harsh punishment. And so I think the answer to whether or not that level of punishment is warranted definitely depends on the child, the environment, and the circumstance. Would you agree?
Whether spanking is okay or not depends on the environment that the child is raised in.
I would say so, because if you are disrespectful in certain cultures, you can be killed for that disrespect. And there are certain cultures in which being disrespectful doesn't have that harsh of a punishment kind of in wider society. And so in getting a child prepared for the society that they're going to live in, I think certain punishments might be warranted.
Okay. Yeah, you're saying to prevent the child from being killed, spanking could be necessary for that.
That's right.
Okay. And so how could we?
Because a spanking is a punishment that a child is going to remember.
Right, right. Yeah, like you were saying, like a course correction.
Right.
How could we tell that that's the only way to keep the child from being killed, though?
Well, I think we know that, I mean, with degrees of harshness and what people recognize as far as cause and effect, if the effect of a given behavior is the um, the
You're
change
kind of coming in
of
and out.
the behavior.
You're getting cut off just a bit.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Can you hear me a little bit better?
yeah, I can hear you now.
I was saying, if a punishment um, is lax and not very harsh, the chances of repeating the behavior are higher.
Okay. And
Right.
harsh is necessarily physical, or
Well, physical
you're
is,
saying that the
I
harshness
think,
is. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, we have a natural pain aversion, right? So pain is definitely going to be up there in the hierarchy of harsh punishments. So if you want someone to not repeat an offense or not repeat the same problem, then using pain is a good way to get them to stop repeating a pattern of behavior. And that's why it's considered so harsh a punishment, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think of it from the child's point of view. Like, are there other non-physical ways that are just as harsh that would have the same effect as far as them not mouthing off and in turn being killed for it? Like,
Possibly. Take for instance, if my daughter were to move a stool in front of the oven and one of the burners are on, and she steps on the stool and is going to reach for one of the hot burners. If I'm right next to her, I could raise my voice really loudly and get her attention, and that's no pain. That's just kind of shock. Or I could snatch her off of the stool, which would be more pain, even though it's not as harsh as a spanking. But I'm going to, my reaction to that is going to be in direct correlation to the consequence. Like, so what's the consequence of me not acting harshly in this moment? She could be so used to my voice, and she might be so, the temptation of touching that shiny burner might be so alluring that she ignores me. And so I'm not saying that a spanking is justified in that scenario, but you can kind of tell where I'm going with the harshness of the reaction depending on the consequence.
There's like a spectrum of harshness that methods that you could use to prevent being burned by the stove and such things.
Sure. Now, like, and take the example, and sorry to use a harsh example, but like take a Jewish family living in a ghetto in Nazi Germany, and say there's a child that mouths off to his or her father, a 10 or 11-year-old child that mouths off to his or her father. If this child doesn't learn very quickly to respect their elders, right, and they're then they could be killed as soon as they step outside. Because they're living in such a violent atmosphere, then the punishment for mouthing off needs to be one that causes that child to remember this is definitely not appropriate. And so the question becomes, is a 10-minute timeout good enough in those circumstances?
Right. Yeah, that's where I was kind of wondering, like, the testability of this. Like, how could we test the effectiveness of physical trauma, in regards to saving lives? Is there I wonder if there's a way that we could test that humanely. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
and if there's no humane way to test that, how confident should we be that that's the best method in certain circumstances?
I think that it tends to be, and I have done zero research on this. So, I mean, if anyone can Google it, I think that it tends to be lower class or poorer citizens who do the majority of the spanking, right? I don't think that maybe that's less typical in wealthy families. Am I wrong? Does anybody else have any research on that?
I have
I don't
heard.
know.
I don't know. I have only heard such things. Biscuit. I have
What
researched the topic.
have you heard on that?
I mean, just what you said. That it mostly, most what I've heard is that mostly Black and Hispanics do that.
Yeah.
What
So
I've heard.
so this is the same thing that I've heard. And when you look at the poorest amongst Americans, at least, it tends to be Black folks. They're 12% of the population and represent less than half of a percentage of the wealth within the population. I think it might be up to 1% at this point, but lots of poor in the Black community, lots of poor in the Latino and Mexican community. And so when you are poor, then the consequences of not being obedient are going to be, I think, in a rational way, more harsh. And I don't think that it's and of course you can get to the point where it's definitely unjustified, where it goes, from a spanking to something more like abuse. And I think it'd be a different conversation where the line should be drawn.
A good question, Biscuit, and then David, if I may.
Yeah, go for it.
So is the idea there that when you are poor, you live in a dangerous area? Where.
Yeah. So I think when you are poor, then you're kind of in a situation where you don't have access to a lot of resources. Your access is limited, and as a result of that, I think that you kind of have to look out for each other a little bit more. And I'm talking about when you're in a dangerous community, like, so not just somebody who's on kind of the lower end of the middle class. I'm talking about like when you're in a poverty-stricken community.
Okay. And so what would you say, so the resources, do you think that both parents that fit this category and parents that do not fit this category, do you think that they both have the same tools available to direct their child? So like if you have a parent in a low income area and someone with more resources, someone with less resources, someone with more resources, are we assuming that they're both equipped equally to know how to punish the child?
Well, I think societal pressure would equip them in different ways, and I'm sorry I keep going to examples, but as somebody who was raised partially in Southside Chicago, my mother would tell me to be home at a certain time, right? And the reason she told me to be home at a certain time is because after dark it got very, very dangerous in my neighborhood, right? Whereas someone in an affluent or wealthy community might tell their children to be inside at a certain time just because it's dinner time, not because the neighborhood becomes dangerous, right? So if a child is late for dinner, and they're not out there, in dangerous situations, the punishment shouldn't be as harsh as it should be for a child in a poor community whose parents have said, be at home at a certain time because they're now going to be surrounded by drug dealers and gang dealers and gang members, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So the situation is kind of different.
Okay. And I have one more question, and if anybody wants to take it after that. So, basically, how would your view or your confidence in this change if you were in a neighborhood, if you met a community of people with that fits the category of little resources, and they were not in a dangerous area, but punishment was still applied for other things, but there is no danger, there is no direct outside consequence to this, right? So being the consequence of then missing dinner is just that they're not at home because the parents said to be at home at 7. You know, the consequence of not going to a certain park is that they'll get spanked because they were told not to go to that park, not because there's dangerous people in that park. So like if you were to, if you met another community of people that also behave in this way, but there was no danger factor, how would that change the way you view this this idea of spanking?
I'm not sure. That's a tough question. And I'd like you, if possible, if you could kind of repackage it and make it a little bit shorter, because I'm kind of thinking on the fly here. You're saying if there was a community in which they dealt out spankings just because of not listening, not because of
like
the
disobedience.
Right, just because of disobedience. You're saying if I were to find a community like that, how would that change my feelings on spankings?
Right. The idea being that it seems like both communities do this spanking where one just uses the danger that exists outside as justification, but the other one does not have that element, but the spanking still exists, still is there.
Yeah, I think that there are, I mean, of course, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that there were, wealthy communities that still use spankings. My wife and I had a conversation about how we wanted to deal with our daughter and whether or not we wanted to use that form of punishment, and came to the conclusion that we probably don't want to spank at all. And I was on the end of wanting to do spankings just because that's the way I was raised. But having to look around where I am, and my wife and I are a lot more well off than I was as a child, and it just doesn't seem to make sense in the area where we're raising our daughter, right? And so the only time that I think it would be appropriate to use physical force with my daughter would be in a situation where she's in imminent danger and might die if I don't quickly remove her from a situation. So
what would you have to be shown to come to the conclusion that it's never okay to hit your kids?
I don't know, that I think that kind of be like asking an atheist, what would you need to see in order to believe that God existed? Like it's tough to kind of create the scenario in which your mind changes about something. I'm not 100% sure. Perhaps data showing that that these things tend to result in trauma. But then again, I would still, I don't know that would destroy kind of the argument that I made about certain situations in certain cultures and neighborhoods, and the justification behind them using spanking. So maybe let's start there. Let's start with if that argument could be torn down, if we could tear down the argument that I put forward, which wasn't, it's not really, I don't think, that solid of an argument. It was just, you know, something I was thinking about from my own childhood. But if you think that, you know, for some reason that makes sense, or there's a logical flaw somewhere in that, then pointing that out to me would be a good start.
Maybe you can rephrase the argument, like just a concise argument for hitting your kids.
Yeah. So I think there are certain neighborhoods, and it's becoming less and less the case in this country and around the world. But I think there are certain neighborhoods and certain countries in the world that have brutal realities for people of all ages. And in those neighborhoods and societies that are brutal, the need to listen to your parents is so important that the consequences to not doing so can be fatal. And I think in protecting your children from those fatal consequences, a harsher punishment is required. And maybe not required, but I think a harsher punishment makes sense, you know? And so that's basically the argument laid out there is there are societies and neighborhoods that have realities that are so harsh and death rates that are so high. And they're, you know, just surrounded by murderers and drug dealers and gang members and criminals. That a light form of punishment is not going to guarantee the safety and right-mindedness of that child.
Okay, so the argument is basically some neighborhoods require spanking of the children in that neighborhood so that they won't die.
Right. So yeah. Or so they're less likely to experience the harsh realities because of their wanting to, you know, avoid spanking.
Okay. And so it's a good argument because some kids do die if they don't get spanked if they live in a certain neighborhood.
I would think so. Like, so I knew that if I wasn't home at a certain time that I was going to get spanked. But so in order to avoid that spanking, I made sure I was home at a certain time. Now, if the punishment for not being home at a certain time were less severe, I would have been more likely to disobey the rule. And disobeying that rule in uh, in the poorest areas of Southside Chicago could have been fatal for a child walking home from school, right? Because I'm walking past drug dealers and drug addicts and people who don't have their heads screwed on tight, you know, and so I'm walking in a brutal reality. It was important for me to get inside, and so you kind of see where I'm going with that. Whereas,
Yeah.
in a community that's less dangerous, if a child doesn't make it home on time, the only consequence is that they're going to be late for dinner, you know, and so the punishment doesn't need to be that harsh because the consequences of not being inside are a lot less severe.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it would not be a good argument for you to use if you were shown enough data that that convinced you that it was never okay to hit your kid. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
I've had a couple of comments. I just want to mention a couple of things that was mentioned in the back channel. One mentioned, and Hamed actually mentioned that this is a moral question. You need to establish what moral standards you're using. Yes, a couple of minutes ago. So I'm not. That was the question. I don't know if anybody wants to take that one. I don't fully agree. I think that sometimes these are just the tools that are available to certain parents, and that's what they're using. I'm not sure that if it's even a moral question to them whether or not spanking is done, but those are just my direct thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, Biscuit, you're free to respond to that. And then if we have any other questions from the audience, I want to try to get to them too. Maybe we can wrap this up, Biscuit, and throw down some bars, and we'll get somebody else up.
Sorry, I'm in here getting my my pizza from this restaurant. I'll head down to the audience.
All right. Thank you, Biscuit. It's always good to have you on stage. Fer just wanted to come up. I don't see him on here anymore. I got another question from the audience. But I think it was maybe more for Biscuit. I think I'll let James come up.
Maybe do a quick reset. And I want to check in with Reed. We've been on for a little over 2 hours. Are you still doing okay on time?
Yeah, I'm good. Yep.
Okay, cool.
Excellent.
So we have somebody else coming up, is that right?
They came in. Oh, yes, I do. I do actually have one up. So, James, I'm gonna bring you up, but let me just do a quick reset, and I'll pass the mic to you afterwards. And hopefully James is getting my invites. Oh yeah, there he is. Thank you, James. So, yeah, so welcome everyone to the SC 101 room in the Street Epistemology Club. We are currently taking questions from people in the audience who are interested in learning about street epistemology. And today we have Reed Nicewander here to help answer your questions. So for this, we just ask that you raise your hands and we'll bring you up one at a time. And we just ask that once your question has been satisfactorily answered, that you bring yourself back down to the audience. Rather not come on stage, feel free to send me a back channel message and I'll ask the question on your behalf. And lastly, the room was created for us a learning environment and it is being recorded. So James, if you have a question or comment, floor is yours.
Yeah, any one of you can answer it. How confident are you that God doesn't exist? Anyone is fine to answer that.
On the scale from 0 to 100.
0.987.
Yeah, on the scale from 0 to 100 for the Christian God, it's like 0.000001%. All the
it's not zero.
It's a non-zero number for me as well, but I do not assert that he doesn't exist.
Yeah, I'm not implying that you do assert. So when you say 0.0001, and then I think the other guy was close to 1 or no, what makes you land on that particular percentage point?
It's the null hypothesis for me. And that's where the null hypothesis usually is.
I'm just throwing out because when you do like a 1 through 100, it seems like 1% and 2% there'd be such an arbitrary difference, and then even from like 2 to 5%, it'd be such an arbitrary difference, especially if you're not claiming that a God exists or that a God doesn't exist. So I'm just wondering, like, why would you make it that hard of a claim, but then not actually land on the claim and just say, I'm absolutely convinced God doesn't exist?
Yeah, I don't want to say absolutely because I still want to hold to the virtue of being open to be wrong. So it's like that virtue is also adding doubt for me. I don't want to be absolute.
Would you say you could be wrong about everything?
Pretty close. It's like it's higher on the hierarchy of values for me it's like even above me wanting to believe true things. It's like being open to being wrong, being willing to be able to change my mind is higher on the hierarchy. Because if I don't have that, then I could be stuck believing something potentially for the rest of my life. That may be wrong.
Because, for example, if we were talking about existence itself and whether or not we exist, I don't know what would be. Oops, sorry, guys. One sec.
Puppy problems.
Hope everyone's okay.
I did not expect the dog to bark. Somebody walked by the house. So when it looks to existence and our own self-existence, I don't know why it would be morally virtuous at any point to say I could not exist or it's possible that I don't exist. I just don't see why that would be something anybody would equate.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to get where you guys feel from that, because you said you were open to the possibility that you could be wrong, but you are also open to the possibility of being wrong on pretty much everything, as we established. So that means existence itself. But I just don't know. I don't know how anybody could say I would be open to not existing or opening to the fact that I don't exist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's hard to be open to the idea that you don't exist because everything you experience is falsifying that hypothesis. If I'm experiencing anything, that hypothesis can't be the case. So that's a pretty close. That's probably one of the examples of where I'd like to be open to being wrong about that, but that's like the one thing, or very close to one thing, where I'm like, I don't know even how that could be possible.
Yeah, and then when you're looking at that and you assign like a moral value to that, like you believe that it's more morally virtuous to admit that you could be wrong on a proposition. I don't know how we're assigning that moral value in the first place. It seems like there has to be something objective that we could all agree on initially before we could even assign a moral value to say I could be wrong.
Maybe.
So then we could shift that just for a second. What would be your moral value that you would use to assign to the proposition that you could say it is possible that I don't exist or possible that I could be wrong?
It is that based value. It's just, you can call it faith, that is the value that I hold to. I think that is the core root of fallibilism. The core value of fallibilism is being open to being wrong. I think that helps us come to truth in general if we have that value.
Yeah, because you said it would be morally virtuous.
Yeah, it's a virtue. It's an attitude.
But then we have to define how we arrive at that moral virtue to say that admitting that you could be wrong on something is better than if you believe you couldn't be wrong, admitting that you could be wrong or that you could be wrong. Makes sense? Like there has to be some kind of either objective or subjective standard that we use. And I'm just trying to figure out what yours would be to say that it's more morally virtuous to admit you could be wrong on any proposition.
You can call it faith.
Okay. So it would just be just your intuition, kind of like what your gut tells you, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's it. That's pretty much my questions. Oops, sorry guys. I do not know what is into these dogs today. I thought that they would be quiet because I knew you guys were recording live. Would you actually send me a link if you don't mind? Because I want to watch my buddy John when you guys were doing Street Epistemology with him.
Mm-hmm.
But I would appreciate that. And thank you.
Sure thing.
Yeah, I sent it to John, and I'll send it to you, James.
Oh, I can just get it from John then. That's okay. No need to put yourself out.
Sounds good.
Any other questions, anybody?
We don't have any questions from the audience at this time?
Yeah, and you guys could message me privately. I'm always looking for interesting guests to do on my YouTube channel. That's James is Tired. I've had Matt Dillahunty on Raw, Apostate Prophet, a lot of big name atheists and big name theists. My conversations are very mellow. It's never an interrogation. I can't stand interrogation conversations. They don't really get you anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. I'll check it out. James is Tired.
Yes, like James is Tired. And I'll be very quick just to tell you how I got that name. When I was an atheist, it was the Tired Atheist. And I did videos on Facebook where I would talk to people. But if we did like a big group conversation and the topic got boring, I would fall asleep in the background. And then they would have to wake me up snoring. So then they started calling me the Tired Atheist. And so when I became a theist, I needed some other name for myself.
Gotcha.
That's a funny story. Yeah, I have the same problem with movies. I have what I coined theatrical, or what is it? Man, I can't remember now. Something narcolepsy. Cinematic narcolepsy. That's what I tend to have.
I know what you're talking about. My brother made me watch Lord of the Rings for the first time, and he made me watch the extended version, which, to let you guys know, just means there's more walking. And like, I fell asleep and they were walking. I woke up like 40 minutes later and they're still walking. And I was mortified.
Yeah. Well, one movie I did not fall asleep on, well, I guess it's more of a series, is the first episode of Squid Game. I did not fall asleep during that.
Well, thank you for the recommendation, and I'll take a look at it. And you guys can definitely move me down at any point and bring someone else up. I appreciate your guys' time.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for coming into the room. We try to do this every Saturday around this time. Thanks for hanging out with us. Looks like we've got Mead here. How's it going, Mead? Welcome back.
Hi. Yeah, I have a question. I was in a group earlier today, and it was on the issue of forgiveness and mental health and longevity. And there was a study done. I'm trying to find the study. I know I had it online, but I lost it. Anyway, there was a study done on longevity and forgiveness, and they came up with a correlation. I don't know what the p-value is for the correlation. I don't know how strong the correlation is, but the group I was in, they were using that as a means to get people who are religious to start forgiving everybody they can find, so that they would add longevity to their lives. So I would like to know what you, if you can find this study. I'd like to know how reliable this study is with respect to its p-value, and also the sampling that was done in the study. Maybe other things, because I want to attack the study, so as to weaken their argument, because they're relying on this one anecdotal study. That's my question.
Question is, how reliable is this particular study about forgiveness affecting life longevity. Is that right?
Yes, the study correlates longevity with forgiveness.
Okay. And you want to, what's your goal?
Well, the goal is to find out how strong is the correlation. Obviously,
Okay.
I don't think forgiveness causes longevity. So I would like to find out what is the level of the p-value of the correlation, how strong, how significant it is, and whether the study is a worthy study. Is it well peer reviewed, and whether there are any biases, like who promoted the study, etc. Whether it was a religious organization, and that sort of stuff.
I wonder what it would mean if somehow the study was valid and reliable. Like how would that affect your life? If you found out the study was legit.
Well, I mean, if the study is legit, then how it would affect my life? I would still want to know, in terms of longevity, how many years would be added to my life if I should forgive one person.
Yeah. So if you would still want to know how it all worked, not only whether it did work.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if I can add 5 years to my life, then I will forgive. I will forgive early. If I can add another 5, I'll forgive Alfonso, and another 5, I'll forgive David.
Okay.
So, I'll be happy.
So I wonder if it's forgiving other people or being forgiven, or if that matters.
Well, that's a good question. I think that the forgiveness would be for my sanity and my longevity.
Yeah. What I would do is I would try to find that study, find out the source of the study, and try to figure out what the motivations of the author of that study are. And maybe that could maybe help try to figure out how reliable or how legit it is. You know what I mean? That's probably what I would do.
Yes, and that is my goal.
I feel like I would want to know a bit more, only because I wonder if this is indirectly pointing to something else, like maybe you live longer because you are not holding on to things that maybe stress you out, that are making you angry or resentful. Whatever that feeling is, maybe where you do not forgive someone, maybe holding on to that is a stressor, and it maybe and it lowers your life expectancy because of the stress that's derived from that. But I don't know if maybe that was explicitly said in the study or not. I think I just got a back channel about this.
Yeah, it kind of reminds
ahead.
me of that idea of, the question is, does prayer work? And, there's this idea of you being stuck in a cave where there's a limited amount of oxygen. And being a religious person, if you pray, that puts you in a state of mind of being a little bit more calm, therefore using less oxygen. And the rescuers are the likelihood that they find you is higher if you're using less oxygen. But the question is it the prayer that worked, or the fact that you're using less oxygen whether that's the actual reason why there's more time that's bought. It kind of reminds me of that. Some kind of correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation type of thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I was sent the study actually, and one line that jumped out at me is that it is in fact the forgiveness of others. You forgiving others, not you being forgiven. The one thing that related to so I'm reading. However, only conditional forgiveness of others remained a significant predictor of mortality after controlling for religious, socio-demographic, and health behavior variables.
Yeah, I wonder how this was tested, like what the testing procedure was for this. It'd be interesting to look into.
Yeah, I can for whoever's interested, I have the article here from PubMed on the topic. So it was it was actually published under the NIH.gov website.
Cool. Well, hopefully that helps your exploration, Mead. Is there anything else you want to ask about or comment on?
Yeah, I would look into the article and do some more research on it because I want to see if it's a reliable research. If, you know, what would be a significant? I think significance is what P5, P 0.5 correlates high significance.
Yeah,
And I
I'm
don't
not
know.
sure.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
don't
sure
know.
about that. What
Yeah.
what would be criteria for you to decide that this article was not legit?
Well, whether it's peer reviewed, I would look at that first.
Cool. All right. Anything else?
That's it. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Mead. I sent you that study in the back channel.
Okay.
If you want
Thanks.
to read over it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if anyone else has any questions or comments, if you have a belief that you would like to have examined, feel free to raise your hands and bring you on stage. Alfonso, go ahead.
I just wanted to. I'm hearing of so many ex-atheists lately, especially a good friend of ours in the club who just converted. And I'm wondering here in the panel, or even if somebody wants to come up on stage from the audience, what's the likelihood, do you think, in your life for you to start believing in a God and a deity, or at least in a spiritual, the possibility of a conscious being, an unembodied consciousness?
I'm open to it. I would just need good reasons first. I currently don't have any that would that I've heard so far.
Slim chance for me.
Looks like we have James though. Welcome, James.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, is this JCC?
Yes, it is.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, just enjoying the conversation. In and out. I've been out and about, so I'm driving back to drop my daughter off at a Halloween party.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was a bit skeptical to bring up James with 0 followers and only 1 follower, and then I scrolled down and I saw he was nominated by Reed. All right,
Yeah,
I'll
I was to be honest, I left Clubhouse and I rejoined, so that's why.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
can't stay away from Clubhouse. Unfortunately.
Yeah, as far as becoming a believer, I would become if there was something to demonstrate that there is a supernatural. I would, be a believer. However, obeying and the orders from the deity, I probably would not.
That's funny. Cool. Reed, early. What about you guys? Do you contemplate the idea? Do you ever have doubts in your lack of faith?
Nope.
I think that was his answer.
That's probably mine. But I've started to think about it a little bit more than just answering it straight, plain and straight. Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to envision that world where, for me at least, right, where there is a God, there is an embodied conscious entity out there. To me, that's mind-boggling. Someone who believes in God comes in and says, I don't understand why you can't believe in it, or why it's not the axiom of life for you as it is for me. And I'm really fascinated by that. Our the basis for our logic being founded on completely opposite ends of the spectrum. And I want to believe that, I'm never going back to God, right? I'm never gonna believe in this because I've been there already in several forms and shapes, and I've had to deal with mental illness and all that. But then you come to think of it and you're like, what would actually make me, I don't think it would be anything rational. So a friend from this club said it wasn't a feeling, something that came on me, a very deep emotional thing that happened. And anything can make you emotional. Anything can make you your neurons. You can have a tumor, and you just start having all these sensations and feelings, or you could do take a psychedelic trip and be convinced that there has to be something. My brother shared that with me and said, I was like, yeah, I've heard of people talking about DMT, and how I was sharing I think it was a YouTube video. It was somebody talking to Matt Dillahunty on how DMT could connect you to some extraterrestrial entities or something. And my brother was like, well, it's possible. Have you ever done DMT? And I was like, never. I mean, if I did, I'd probably have a relapse, a psychotic episode or something. But yeah, I mean, that question is kind of haunting me these days. Just hearing I've heard at least 4 or 5, since the beginning of my life in Clubhouse, probably around 6 people at least that are ex-atheists and now, are spiritual in one form or another. And interesting. That would be an interesting bit of research to do, to see how many atheists convert, and the reasons and why. I don't think it's mostly logical. I think it's mostly something happening in your brain that provokes it. Those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, I think I would also not ignore of asking the question such as like, what was your stance while you were an atheist? Like, I don't know if maybe they always had that bug, right? They always had that doubt. They never really were 100% over. That's one thing that I know I would want to ask to that one person that just switched sides recently. I would want to ask questions about that.
And that's exactly what a believer in God says, right? Maybe you were never really a believer. You right? You maybe you were never a Christian or a Muslim.
But I wouldn't. It's not to say that he wasn't absolutely sure before, right? He could be. I would just want to know whether that was a factor or not. I think it's still it is in fact still a valid question. So I've actually, to answer your question, Alfonso, I've thought about this, and I've thought about just about every scenario of how this could be, right? And the answer for me is also a hard no. Well, what if I am wrong about a God and there is in fact a God? I don't see why a God would want me to believe in something that I'm not convinced of. And I don't know that would be a just God to be punished for that. The classical old response, if he knows what it takes to convince me, then why hasn't he done that? There's people that have all these anecdotes of things that definitely turn them over. Why hasn't that happened for me? So if go ahead if you want to react to that. I have one more.
Yeah, to me, who was it? Was it Bishop or Mead who was running a room on? It was Mead, right? On logic. Can you be logical or emotional? Something that had to do with logic and emotion, right? Whether we, believers or unbelievers are so because of logic or because of emotional, because it's an emotional thing. And brains are incredibly powerful, and some are very healthy and strong, and probably not change, from one side to the other. And you don't see clear patterns, right? That go, an incredibly clever person, successful business person, a CEO, whatever. It doesn't have to be a believer or non-believer. I'd even lean to say that my recent research has shown that actually believing has more advantages than disadvantages, because of all the implications. It creates this tension within you to strive for being a better person. And no matter how. I was listening to a room this morning about, it's not by works, it's just by grace, by faith, what have you. No matter how you want to say, it's a matter of surrendering. Surrendering is already an action. It's already doing something. It's already, and people will eventually get tired and say, you know what? If you haven't given up drugs in the last 10 years and your path, and you claim to be a God believer from whatever tradition, most of them will probably start dismissing you very quickly. And I'm starting to ramble. So I just wanted to say how the word, delicate. I wanted to contrast how strong and firm and powerful the brain is, but at the same time, how fickle and delicate it can be with just very small influences or things that happen to it.
Yeah. So the last scenario is actually what you mentioned, Alfonso, is the idea of adopting a belief has advantages, right? And that is something that historically I haven't done that for those reasons. So like for me right now, any sort of advantage that may come from just adopting a belief for the sake of it, it's not something that's at all attractive to me. But something where I become convinced, I think I know what it takes for me to become convinced. And I just cannot become convinced because some sort of emotional pressure or because it's convenient. I think if God is real, he knows what it takes to convince me, and so that should be provided. And it should also be something that stays to be true after whatever event it is that switches me over. It needs to stay true afterwards as well. So,
are we in the after party already? Should we invite people up, or are we still Q&A?
We're about 2.5, or wait, coming up on 3 hours. We're probably going to end the room soon. So if there's anybody in the audience that has any last questions or comments, this would be the time to come up and especially since we have Reed here. So if there's anybody in the audience that wants to ask one last question, now's the time. Last call. Cool. Well, I think next week we have Quaid coming back. So that'll be good. 1 o'clock Pacific time next Saturday. I want to thank everybody that came up on stage. Thanks, Alfonso. Thanks again, Early. And thanks, Reed, for hanging out with us again today. It was good. It was fun. Thanks for recording. Hopefully it'll be, actually it will be on YouTube if anybody wants to go back and re-listen to something. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Sure
Hope
thing.
to see you next week.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
If anybody wants to continue this conversation and talk, I'm gonna probably start a room. I don't know if I should do it under this club. What do you think, Reed and David, or should I just open it under another club?
Whatever you want to do.
Cool. I'll do an after party under Street Epistemology so that people can come over and know that it's related to this room.
Awesome.
Sounds
good. I'm going to try to have another meeting here shortly with somebody. So then I'm going to hit the road. I appreciate everybody. Take care.